G'day and welcome to the latest episode where today we're joined by EMVision Medical Devices co-founder and CEO Scott Kirkland. Scott co-founded the company back in 2017 and the company listed on the ASX in December 2018. And it was born out of the University of Queensland where the professors there began to develop a portable brain scanner, and some 8 years later this device is being used to aid stroke care and potentially positively impact millions of lives. Scott walks us through the FDA De Novo pathway, or the regulatory pathway that the company is currently navigating, and unpacks the trial underway at some of America's biggest names, including Mayo Clinic and more, and what a successful readout means for the pathway to commercialisation. We hope you enjoy. Scott, thanks very much for joining us. Obviously, EMVision, you're the Managing Director and CEO and co-founder. Maybe before we get into the technology and what you're solving and the problem, just take us back. How did EMVision get started and where did the genesis come from?
Sure. Well, it really was a bit of a serendipitous journey, meeting a technology transfer officer out of the University of Queensland at a conference. And she introduced me to the original research team at the University of Queensland, which was led by Professors Bush and Stuart Crozier. And they were working on a rather radical transformative approach to sensing and imaging disease within the body. And they had lots of interesting prototypes in their lab at UQ, portable skin scanners, torso scanners. What was most interesting and attractive from a commercial opportunity and in terms of meeting an unmet clinical need was this portable brain scanner. And they were very keen to get it out of the lab. They needed to work with some entrepreneurs and a team and with the capital to take it to the next stage and bring it into the real world. And so we started that journey about 8 years ago now.
And what were you doing before that?
I was working for an AI tech company called Quantcast in all the usual buzzwords, big data, AI, et cetera. Ultimately, selling digital advertising in a slightly more intelligent manner, but help build that business in Australia in terms of building out that direct sales function, and was looking for an opportunity to have a more lasting and meaningful positive impact. And healthcare is a pretty good place to start.
And stroke is obviously affects a lot in terms of those that are listening. I'm sure everyone knows someone who's had a stroke or been impacted by a stroke. Just talk to us about the actual technology, about what it's looking to solve, and the sort of both bedside and ambulance nature.
Yeah, and every time we speak to someone as a friend or family member that's been impacted, I didn't have any direct connection to an actual stroke event until about 4 or 5 weeks ago. My own mum had a very, fortunately she's doing fantastically well, but she had a very small ischemic stroke.
Yeah.
And that really brought it home. And even we know hospitals are really well-oiled machines, and it's amazing how they can deliver care. But even at a comprehensive centres, the best resource centres, there's still inefficiencies.
Which is critical in a stroke, right?
Yeah, and we assume something like a CT or a CT perfusion can see everything, and it's 100% accurate, and it's just not the reality. And the ability to get into an MRI in the early hours in the acute phase is just not practical.
Yeah.
So there is meaningful inefficiencies and delays and gaps even at very well-resourced hospitals, but ultimately our intention with the technology is to make stroke diagnosis and therefore stroke treatment more equitable, more accessible, wherever the patient is.
And maybe just talk about the current sort of workflows at the moment and the sort of deficiencies of those, and then sort of overlay your solutions as to how that can help.
I think the best way to explain it is to think about what happens in cardiac care. So when someone has a suspected heart attack, there is a point of care test in an ECG, which in the field, at the paramedic level, will tell them what is going on with a binary action they can do. And say, no, this person's had a suspected heart attack. They can go directly to the right hospital. The hospital can be notified in advance. The cardiologist can get ready, cath lab, straight in. It's incredibly efficient. Stroke care is about 30 years behind when it comes to point of care tests. So really they are flying blind until they get to the infrastructure that has CT imaging or MR. And what we're seeking to do is deliver a solution that's similar to that ECG point of care test, where we can go from undifferentiated there's symptoms, maybe it's a suspected stroke, we don't know, to not only is it a stroke, it's a bleed or it's a blockage, and this is approximately where it is in the brain. And then we know where to go, we know what to do next, we can notify the right levels of intervention if it's required. And ultimately, the holy grail for the neurologists we collaborate with is being able to treat patients in the field, in their home, which is where we're heading.
And in terms of the need for it, like obviously it sounds pretty compelling. What are the sort of KOLs, and we'll get to the pivotal trials and the results of those shortly. But I suppose, when's the first time, like talk us through the timeline in terms of, the first finished unit, getting tested and the outcomes of that, and key opinion leaders, what have they been saying?
Well, even if we go back to the genesis and that time of taking the technology out of the university and spinning it into EMVision, the original research team were working with a number of clinicians out of the Princess Alexandra Hospital.
Yep.
And from day dot, fortunately, even before we arrived, they were telling them, focus on the brain, because that is, and particularly stroke, that is where the greatest unmet need is. And that's a result of the innovation in stroke care in the last 20 to 30 years. So prior to that time, all a clinician could offer would be empathy, really. Now they can pull clots out of the brain with highly sophisticated surgery, non-invasive surgery to try and intervene with hemorrhages. There's very effective drugs. There's a whole lot of things that can be done, but we need to diagnose more people, diagnose them quicker to actually administer those. So before you can go down the correct pathway, you need to know, A, is it a stroke? If so, is it a bleed or a blockage? So the clinical enthusiasm, because they can treat it and they know how powerful these interventions are, if they're provided in a timely manner, there's no shortage of clinical enthusiasm. And a number of our academic medical centers that we're working with in the pivotal trial, some of the biggest names in healthcare in the US, a number of those were inbound inquiries. So that's never been a challenge in terms of finding clinicians that are
the actual uptake from a clinician side, which is kind of key, right?
Well, and then there's the economic argument and the business case, which plays into the level of benefit evidence that we can generate. What are the real time savings from using the product? And then the reimbursement piece, which is...
No, definitely want to get to the revenue.
We might lose your audience when we get into deep dive on reimbursement. We'll see how we go.
We can talk about how you make money. But just in terms of you talk to the pivotal trials, you've obviously got a program going at the moment. Maybe if you just talk to us about the FDA sort of pathway and whatnot. Is that the equivalent of for the layman's like myself? Is that like a drug? Is it fast tracked? Is it high risk? How should we look at that?
So the most common approval pathway for a medical device is known as the 510K, which is where you're demonstrating substantial equivalence for your product. So it's as good or better than something that already exists. Our technology, so the hardware, the software, everything about it is new. It's novel. So we are going down a De Novo pathway. And that means we have to prove safety and efficacy from first principles. So it is generally...
So is that harder?
It is harder. There is more work. You usually run bigger studies, which is what we are doing. But you are not manufacturer 38 out of 570.
First to market.
You're the first, and you're creating a new category. So there is an opportunity to have a long-term competitive moat as such around that regulatory classification. Anyone coming thereafter needs to show they're as good or better than your product.
Exactly. And in terms of competitive space at the moment, how does that look?
So there's obviously a lot of interest in trying to solve these problems, both pre-hospital tools as well as in hospital. Some are trying to do both. There is efforts to make existing modalities smaller, more mobile, whether it's CT or MRI, and there's some impressive weight reduction embodiments of those devices, they're still 500-600 kilograms. So they're mobile, but they are not what we would see as a widespread scalable opportunity, certainly not in every ambulance, in the Royal Flying Doctor Service or every ICU. But nevertheless, they are mobile. In terms of point of care, lightweight tools, there are efforts to take existing modalities that historically haven't necessarily been great at stroke diagnosis and apply AI and try and make better sense of the signals and arrive at something that's diagnostically useful. But some kind of early promise, but I haven't seen anything, and our clinical collaborators haven't seen anything that has a similar level of diagnostic accuracy and clinical utility from the same type of form factor that we're talking about.
I suppose you want to have competition though, in a way, if that makes sense, that if there's no one else trying to do it, it probably says there's not the end market or not the opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, another big question is always first to market.
Yeah.
First to market. I think for us, the most important is dominating that market for a decade.
As soon as you're getting through, going hard in terms of widespread adoption and whatnot.
Yeah.
And talk to us about the current clinical trial. What is it practically doing? How long is it going to take? Touch wood, it's all successful. What's the next steps from there? And you get what is it, De Novo? FDA De Novo approval. Obviously, that's still a risk. But what does it look like from there? Is it widespread? Commercial rollout, or how does that work?
So we've run successful multi-site studies in Australia that we used a large part of the data to train our AI models. So we have an AI element within the product that turns those signals into a diagnostic output. They were successful. We had high accuracy, albeit on a smaller sample.
So what does that look like in terms of accuracy?
So we used circa 240 of the patient cases to train the model. And then we had around 50 to 60 test cases, so unseen cases that the algorithms were applied to test their capabilities. And we were principally looking at the ability to differentiate a patient with a bleed in the brain and without, high sensitivity and specificity, so 92 and 85, and those with a blockage and without, so 95 and 80. And when we look at other tools available, that's certainly very encouraging accuracy levels. Again, it's a smaller sample. So the next stage was a statistically significant pivotal trial that would support a FDA De Novo submission. So we met with the FDA over a year ago now to align on the design of that study. It has a training verification phase, up to 10 patients. That's per site. That's to ensure that the operators are capturing high quality signals, because we know when we get a good scan done, our algorithms are very, very reliable. So it's about ensuring that we're getting high quality signals. And then there's a primary analysis of 300 patients, 150 with a bleed, 150 without, which is a mixture of suspected strokes like mimics as well as ischemic strokes. And so the primary endpoint is demonstrating our ability to detect hemorrhage or not, exceeding 80% sensitivity specificity. If we are successful in our pivotal trial, we substantially de-risk the FDA approval point, because it is the primary data upon which the FDA is relying on for that safety and efficacy determined.
And then we won't talk timelines because that'll take however long it needs to take. But in terms of post that, what's the sort of next step? Obviously, that'd be a massive milestone for the company.
So the readout is a critical element, and being successful there, meeting our endpoints. That then forms the basis of our technical file, our dossier that goes to the FDA. That's progressing in the background. In the lead up to submitting that, and thereafter, we're preparing our go-to-market.
So you're not just going to wait and hope for the best.
No, and the FDA process itself is always interactive as well. You always get questions. That's how it works. During that FDA review, which can last anywhere from 9 to 12 months, is the typical timelines for De Novo.
When did that start?
So it starts from the FDA submission.
Got it.
So targeting that later this calendar year.
Got it.
And in that time, we'd be building out our go-to-market. So we've talked previously about the US being our primary market. We do FDA first strategy, and a targeted launch within the Southern Stroke Belt, expanded Stroke Belt states, whereas the highest mortality and burden of stroke in the country. It also happens to be where we have some great clinical relationships through our pivotal study. So, for example, we're working with Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville. In Florida, we're also working with UT Health Memorial Hermann in Houston. It's one of those regions. Memorial Hermann have about 14 hospitals across Houston. So building out that go-to-market direct sales model for quite a few reasons, as well as retaining margin, upstream marketers, sales reps, customer service support, but in a measured manner. We're not, because you can spend a lot of capital.
Blow it up,
It's really around, the playbook is getting academic medical centers, KOLs, the evidence that we can then proliferate out through podiums, through the major conferences, high impact publications.
Because I suppose you don't need a massive
Salesforce or something that is reasonably specific, right? That if you've got the KOLs, it's not like you need to have 200 or 300 sales team because you can see that in terms of the medical device field that they really ramp up in the US.
And there's multiple touch points. So there's clinicians across the whole sphere that have interest and motivation in seeing this product in use. And that's everyone from a stroke neurologist, ED physician, a interventional neuroradiologist, performing neurosurgeons, through to critical care specialists and ICU. So we will need sales reps that have experience in that multidisciplinary approach. But yeah, we don't need hundreds of sales reps.
And talk to us about the actual device got on the ground there. How does it actually work? It looks a little bit astronauty.
Yeah, astronauty. Look, it's won 4 or 5 major international design awards.
Pretty cool,
so I will pass on that astronauty, that feedback. I did have someone email us once about whether we could take it up in space. I don't know how many strokes are occurring in space. Look, it's as I mentioned, it's RF, so radio frequency, and the signals that it's sending are not dissimilar to what your mobile phone uses to transmit voice and data. So what that means is they're non-ionizing, so CT X-rays ionizing. As a result, there is, there's dosage limitations. There's a whole lot of infrastructure. This device is self-shielded. We don't need a specialist operator like a technician. It can be operated by a nurse or a paramedic.
That's good,
Clinicians still making the decisions around that, whether it's triage, transfer, treatment, whatever it is. But the scan can be captured by any healthcare professional that's trained, and it's easy, very easy to use. How it works, the antennas surround the head. One antenna will transmit a RF signal. That signal will transmit, reflect, scatter, and those interactions will be influenced by the dielectric properties of the brain tissue. So conductivity and permittivity, these values that are unique to our modality that we're measuring, and they will change as to whether that tissue has a bleed present or a blockage present, and even whether that blockage is an hour old, 6 hours, 12 hours old. They all have a unique value. And we leverage that contrast mechanism to determine, is this patient healthy, or in fact, do they have a bleed or do they have a blockage? And it all happens very quickly. Scans literally a matter of seconds. The whole workflow is, circa 5 minutes. And then they can get a, clear determination. What do we do? That informs what do we do next.
If we talked about the sort of cost side or the revenue side. How do you look at the market size? It feels a bit crude, talking about. I don't know, it's the reality, but the addressable market and how much we can sell when you're talking about stroke care. But it's a reality. What how big does it look? How much of a problem is it? And how big of a solution can we provide?
It's certainly a rising societal health economic burden. US spend about $90 billion a year on health stroke related healthcare. So it's big numbers. The aging population, and even in the developing world, it's becoming more of a problem. Obesity, hypertension, smoking.
So stroke incidence has gone up.
And we, the healthcare community, is certainly getting better at treating it. But again, the amount of patients that actually receive those interventions is very modest. So in the US, it's typically less than circa 25% that actually get those treatments, let alone in the first hour from when the stroke occurs.
And why is that so important in the first hour? I know that it's a critical thing.
So, and they call it the golden hour. For ischemia, well, it's a few things. When you have a stroke, and the most common is a blocked blood vessel, the brain is getting deprived of oxygen, brain tissue is starting to die. It's about 1.9 million cells that die every minute. And so you can imagine the earlier you can unblock that and get blood flow restoring, the more brain you can save, therefore the less disability. There's other elements like the clot itself is softer at that point, potentially easier to break down with drugs or remove. So the earlier the better. The drugs themselves are typically only able to be used up to 4.5 hours from the beginning of the stroke. So there's a short window for blockages. Same with bleeds. You don't want it to get bigger. So they may lower the patient's blood pressure to minimize the growth of the hematoma. Otherwise, there's surgical options as well.
Yeah. And so when we talk about the addressable market or the size, you've got obviously the two solutions. Why? Maybe talk us through the bedside side.
Yes.
Why not just focus on one? Why, or one or the other, and then fund?
Well, I think we're under no illusion that the pre-hospital space is the biggest market opportunity, both in terms of just raw numbers. So if we look at road and air ambulances in the US, we're talking about 60,000 versus relevant hospital departments, EDs, stroke wards, ICUs of call it 10,000.
Yeah.
It's the biggest opportunity. And in terms of patient benefit, it's the most transformative because the closer you can bring the diagnosis and treatments to the patient, the better. But there is a natural technological evolution whereby we have our production equivalent bedside unit, which is known as the EMU, which is our most advanced product. That's doing a lot of heavy lifting. That will go down that De Novo pathway. Once that's approved, it opens the door to a 510K for our next generation. So then it's a quicker path to market for the smaller version. And there may be a future whereby the first responder, the backpack version, finds its way onto a cart. And it's an EMU 2.0, for example. But in hospital, there's lots of use cases. It really varies depending on the resources of the hospital. At the smaller end of the scale, regional sites, often either they may not have a CT or they may not have 24/7 radiology or techs to run the CT, so there can be a gap there. At larger hospitals, there's different models whereby some of the major comprehensive centers are interested in what's called a direct-to-angio model. So they want to use the device, do a quick scan at the front door, bypass the CT, and get those patients directly into the angio suite for intervention. A bit like getting them direct to the cath lab. I was talking about for cardiac care. Other sites, they are interested in its use when their imaging assets are under a lot of pressure. Maybe there's been a multi-vehicle car crash and there's a big queue for the CT or MR or gunshots, whatever it may be, and they can do a quick triage scan with our device to know who to prioritize, as well as managing mimics and others that they suspect are not a stroke, but getting confirmation. Lots of use cases through to ICU, keeping a close eye on patients that are at risk of deteriorating. You can imagine taking someone off the floor in ICU down to radiology. It's a big trip. It could take an hour or two. The nurse has to go leave the ward, and suddenly the ward's down, short-staffed.
Operationally.
So,
and if we look at the ASX listed space is hard work at the best of times. How have you found the journey as a whole?
Yeah, and we listed relatively early in our journey.
So when did you list?
That was December 2018. It was back at 25 cents. It's been a positive experience. There is probably more around your strategy that you unfortunately have to share in a listed environment than you otherwise perhaps would like to.
But I suppose that's how you get the money as well, though, right?
Yeah, in terms of access to capital, we've had good support. I think what's been transformational for our business is two things. One, our ability to access non-dilutive funding through grants, which we have secured about $27 million since inception through various grant programs. That has hugely minimized the amount of shares we've had to issue along the way, and it's obviously an ongoing part of our strategy, and we have quite a few $1 million left under those. The other is securing a strategic investor, which is a US technology company called Keysight, which is not a name many people in the domestic investment community are familiar with, but a quick Google, you'll see they're New York Stock Exchange listed. They're about a $47 billion business, and they're the leader in test and measurement. We have a long-term product collaboration and supply relationship, and they're our number one shareholder.
So how did that relationship come about?
Well, in fact, again, before we even turned up, they had a relationship with the research team at the University of Queensland.
So long-standing.
And we were using. We think of this. They're called vector network analyzers or VNAs. You can think of it as a bit like the brains of the system that when we measure those signals that our devices, our antennas are sending and receiving. Our first iteration, our first proof of concept prototype used an industry agnostic version of theirs, which was super high performance. It was a huge box. It was like one of those 1990s Dell PC towers. It would just, and it did what we needed for proof of concept, but it had a whole lot of features that we were not using for our application. And we, for Keysight, I think the healthcare market is a very interesting opportunity. And in particular, our relationship is unique in that when we talk about selling a scanner, we're talking about a Keysight component in our device, embedded. So it's an embedded. So our TAM of 60,000 ambulances in the US becomes their addressable as well. So we worked with them to miniaturize that component. It's literally gone to 4 boards that now sit in our EMU. So it's bespoke for our application. And we've got the next generation arriving shortly for our first responder, which is like a single board.
Miniaturized.
Yeah. So it's amazing what they've been able to do and we've been able to do together to go on that journey to make it bespoke for our application.
When obviously they're strategic, when we think about the sort of future, and you can shut me up if I'm asking the wrong question, but wouldn't it make sense that once you're through all of this, a $47 billion company just bolts this little ASX listed company on, or is it sort of not within their field? How do you look at that?
I think, like I mentioned, they are they're the leader in test and measurement. They are very successful in the telecommunications space. In anyone establishing data centers would use their equipment, automotive, semiconductor. And they have a number of
all the growing spaces.
Yeah, and they have a number of growing categories: quantum, AI, IoT, and healthcare is one of those top areas of interest. We do a lot of co-marketing together. So we were at Medica in Dusseldorf in November, which is the largest medical technology conference. Yep. It was huge. A few years back, we also did RSNA in Chicago, which I thought was big. It was like, 4 big halls. And I get to Medica, I'm like, this is ridiculous. It was like 16 giant exhibit halls. There's a lot of nice synergies in terms of what we do. But our strategy is really to build a self-sustainable business that can produce the product in Australia. Yep. And export it all over the world, mostly under direct model is our expectation.
Yep. No, that all makes sense. And if we look at sort of 3 years away, you should, touch wood, and obviously there's risk and all the rest of it around FDA, but you should be in market by then. How does sort of success look like in 3 years' time?
I think the major success point for the early years of commercialization is having those academic medical centers, those tertiary teaching hospitals using it, having a positive experience. And you can see there's plenty of aspirational peers of ours that maybe they only have 5 or 6 centers using it, but they're big names. They're the Mayos of the world, the Mass Gen. And it's funny, with clinicians, often one of the first questions asked is who else is using it? Yeah. But having those pilot or reference sites that we can leverage, but also having a body of evidence that is building to show not just the diagnostic accuracy of the product, but its ability to improve workflow, improve care, time to diagnosis, all these things. There's some AI software tools that are literally everywhere, and they were able to demonstrate a circa 15-minute time saving in the stroke care pathway in terms of the moment someone arrives to notifying the interventional team, 15 minutes. And they're literally, 1,600 hospitals. So it's that kind of measurable, tangible benefit that we want to be able to demonstrate and have, as I mentioned, proliferated at the major stroke conferences. And then beyond stroke, it's moving into traumatic brain injury. Yeah. So that's another huge category. There's a lot of patients that have had some kind of fall, head knock, that have to have a head CT to make sure there's no bleeding in the brain. And it's like 90% of them do not need CT. Yeah. So the clinical community is pretty strong in its advocacy for something that is non-invasive, non-ionizing, that could quickly determine, is this a severe TBI or is it mild or moderate or a healthy brain? So There's 15 million strokes worldwide each year. There's about 26 million TBI events that are medically treated. So you can imagine same hardware, software upgrade, and we're expanding our consumable revenue profile.
And the approval process on that? Would that
Be a
bit,
510K.
yeah, so a bit easier in terms of because you've got the De Novo.
Yeah, and we're already have a protocol approved with an ability to enroll TBI patients with a data collection study we're running.
Last question. In terms of success for you, obviously, co-founder, been at it a while now, listed 8 years.
Yep.
How do you sort of look? Is it share price that's success, or
Definitely not. Definitely not.
Yeah, patient and care outcomes.
Share price. I think we've been as high as $4 during COVID period, and I don't know if we'd scanned anyone yet, or maybe had scanned a handful of people. So for me, it's the product is out there making a positive impact, and if it's doing that, the share price will take care of itself. I think that's pretty obvious.
Perfect answers. I'm always worried to ask that one, but you've nailed it. Well done on what you've created today. Good luck for the future, and look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Scott.
Cheers.
Cheers.